This video features discussions of suicide. Viewer discretion is advised. At about 11:30 p.m. on Valentine's Day 1975, a couple walking on a private road in the sparsely populated area of Naomi, near Belle Chasse in Plaquemine Parish, Louisiana, came across the body of a young male, hanging by a bedsheet from a persimmon tree. Against the tree's trunk, a sealed glass jar containing multiple sheets of paper was also spotted. Naturally, the authorities were called and the body was promptly retrieved. The boy's death was ruled a suicide. Evidence suggested he had climbed up into the tree before tying one end of the sheet to a branch and the other around his neck in a slip knot. When the couple who found him had walked past that same tree some hours earlier, around 5:25 p.m., there was no sign of his presence, leading to the conclusion he died in the 6-hour period between 5:30 and 11:30 p.m. How he arrived in the area, which is about 800 feet off Louisiana Highway 23, is unknown. The decedent was white and estimated to be about 16 or 17 years old. At 6 feet tall or thereabouts, he weighed around 160 pounds. His hair, which was long in the front, was brown, as were his eyes. His upper front teeth protruded slightly. An article published a day after his death by the Times-Picayune describes him as, quote, fuzzy-faced. The boy was found wearing a Puritan brand knit shirt with a maroon design on a yellow background, blue Arrow brand trousers upon which the cleaning number DD44 was found, a brown belt, one grey sock and one dark blue sock. Curiously, he didn't have shoes on, nor any found near the body. The only personal effect he had on him was a comb in his trouser pocket. When police opened the glass jar by the decedent's feet, they uncovered a 4-page-long suicide note addressed foremost to Mom and Dad. Only a select few sections of this note were released. These sections, in no particular or specified order, read as follows. Mom and Dad, I feel I have acted very methodically and coolly in my action and my words. It is best if I cease to live quietly than risk that later I will break and shatter by violence or linger years under care. I implore you to see a psychiatrist in order that you might understand my death and my life. Ask thoroughly about what I was, and you will see that it is not tragic that I am gone, but more natural than if I continued. You have provided me with excellent advantages and privileges and experiences. I am extremely grateful for all your sacrifices, time, and support. I am now repaying you with an arrogant act. In this light, I do see it as criminal. I can only hope that you see that it was me who caused it. I am a bomb of frustration and should never marry or have children. It is safest to defuse the bomb harmlessly now. I do not want to bother with being a reformed and cured person limping through life. I am this self-centered. I have wanted to do this for over a year. I am not sad or see this as tragic. I feel a release. This is the only way I knew to attain harmony. In a section entitled Why You Should Not Feel Responsible, the decedent wrote as follows, quote, I was born with a definite, pervasive melancholy. What frustrated me most in the last year was that I had built no ties to family or friends. There was nothing of lasting worth and value. I led a detached existence and I was a parody of a person, literally and figuratively. I didn't tell jokes, I was a joke. Unquote. He went on to cite the works of French sociologist Émile Durkheim, who, according to various sources, defined suicide as an inner direction of homicidal feelings against someone else. Addressing the police, the decedent wrote, quote, You are bound to preserve domestic peace and order. If you do pursue who I was and spend hundreds of dollars, you will accomplish little. There are no legal consequences of my death or any kind of entanglements. All that can happen is that you will shatter the domestic peace and order of 2 innocent lives. Do not deprive them of the hope that their missing son will return. Would this avoid cruelty? Let me be. Let it be as if I wasn't ever here. Simply cremate me as John Doe." Unquote. The note concludes with the following. Quote, "I was a withdrawn baby who became a withdrawn, unpleasant person. I have convinced myself and others that I am not capable of being an asset to society. I am no longer interested in the world and know that it is not interested in me. When you stop growing, you are dead. I stopped growing long ago. I never did develop into a real person, and I cannot tolerate the false and empty existence I have created." A search for the young man's identity was launched, with over 300 parents of missing children coming to view the body at the Algiers funeral home. His description and fingerprints were circulated throughout the nation, yet no matches turned up. Finally, in June, the boy was buried in an unmarked grave in a cemetery in Gretna, Jefferson Parish. There he rested undisturbed for 30 years, until tragedy struck in August 2005. With Hurricane Katrina came massive destruction all across Louisiana. Almost 2,000 people are known to have lost their lives as a direct result of the disaster, but the living weren't the only ones so devastatingly affected. Countless amounts of graves were displaced, including the unknown suicide victims. It doesn't end there, though. The young man's case files were also destroyed in the hurricane, leaving law enforcement with no copies of his fingerprints and dentals, or any record of his resting place. Needless to say, DNA acquisition is not an option in this case. All identifying information looks to have been lost entirely, leading to the possibility he may never be reunited with his name. It seems he got what he wanted in the end, to simply remain John Doe. Perhaps the most popular theory among online sleuths is that John Doe was actually a man named Bayard William Cousins. Cousins was 22, going on 23, when he left his home in Virginia Beach on the 1st of February 1975 whilst his parents were out of town. When they returned, they found a note in which he told them not to worry about him. He's never been seen since. Cousins was clearly clever, being an ecology activist fluent in Spanish, which would match up with what we know about our Doe's level of intelligence, as seen in his notes. Both Cousins and the Doe were about 160 pounds, although Cousins was a bit taller at 6'2" or 3 inches. Doe had brown hair and brown eyes. Cousins had hazel eyes and hair that's described on NamUs as, quote, "dark brown to the point of almost black." So far, I'd say the disparities aren't significant enough to rule out a match. What throws me off, however, is the fact that Cousins had what's described as a cross scar on his finger. Assuming this means a cross-shaped scar, you'd think this would have been discovered on the Doe autopsy, given the body was fresh. This scar and the difference in age really does make me think twice about what otherwise looks like a very real possibility. The medical examiner should have been able to tell the difference between the body of a 23-year-old and the body of a 16-year-old based on bone development. I'd like to think the Doe's bones and teeth were thoroughly examined at autopsy and that's how they determined his age, but it's entirely possible they didn't. In any case, I'm of the opinion that Cousins was probably not the Belle Chasse John Doe, though again, please don't take my word as gospel. It's worth noting the law enforcement officer handling Cousins' case thought this theory not only possible, but plausible given the circumstances. But again, nothing can be proven as the Doe's identifiers have long since been destroyed. My immediate thought upon reading the Doe's letter was that he may have been struggling with his sexuality or gender identity. Back in the 70s, being LGBT was still highly stigmatized, with a lot of people viewing others who are LGBT as abnormal or unnatural. What struck me is the decedent's total avoidance of any gendered language other than the term John Doe. It got me thinking about whether he, or rather they, if this is the case, may have had gender dysphoria. Back then, gender dysphoria was treated primarily by trying to force the affected individual into identifying with their biological sex, and I don't think I need to explain how that could drive someone, especially someone with other underlying issues, to suicide. If our Doe was LGBT, perhaps they thought death was the only way they could escape their psychological distress and finally be at peace. To me, it also sounds like our Doe might have suffered from dissociation. Having a dissociative disorder myself, the phrase parody of a person really hit hard, as that's exactly how I feel when I'm depersonalizing. In part due to my dissociative issues, I struggle with feelings of emptiness and a diminished sense of empathy, along with a sense of personal inadequacy. Reading our Doe's letter, it seems as though he did too. With long-term dissociation, there comes a point when you're so detached from your emotions and self that you become numb and apathetic towards everything. I know I felt like I was being forced to exist in a world with no place for me. Dissociation is a direct response to high psychological stress and/or trauma. It's basically the mind's way of coping when neither fight nor flight is an option, and by its very nature is often comorbid with other conditions such as MDD and PTSD. Among patients with dissociative disorders, rates of suicidal ideation are high. I'd like to reiterate that I am just hypothesizing here and not trying to diagnose our Doe with anything, as I'm certainly not a professional. Others online have suggested the decedent may have committed a crime or perhaps had urges to commit a crime, and subsequently committed suicide due to guilt. We do know his fingerprints were circulated, but no matches were found, indicating he'd never been arrested. I do wonder how he got to his site of discovery. As far as I can tell, it's incredibly remote. In fact, Naomi is such a small place, I can't even find a population estimate online. I'm still dumbfounded as to why he had no shoes on. There's a theory he escaped from a psychiatric facility, which could explain this, as they usually confiscate anything that could be used as a ligature, such as shoelaces. What discounts this for me, though, is the presence of a belt. If he was in psychiatric care and known to be actively suicidal, I highly doubt they'd allow him to keep that. Could someone have stolen his shoes? Did he dispose of them somewhere along his journey because they were identifying? If they were somehow removed and displaced by animals, within a period of no longer than 6 hours, might I add, wouldn't they have been found nearby? I've spent way too long trying to figure out where these shoes could have gotten to, and I've come up with next to nothing. It really is a baffling aspect of this case. Also, if he didn't have a bag with him, where'd he put the sheet? Was he just walking around with it in hand? Wouldn't the belt have been a more convenient tool? Pardon the crude phrase, I couldn't figure out how to word it more delicately. If he was getting rid of his personal effects along his way, where did they all end up? When it comes to this particular case, I have too many questions. If I ask them all, we'd be here for hours, so I'll spare you the torment. As far as I know, law enforcement are no longer investigating our Doe's case. He's not even on NamUs or the Doe Network, and like Ellie, the LSU Faces Lab has no records pertaining to this case. If you think you may know who this Doe is, you could try contacting the Plaquemine Parish Sheriff's Office, though whether they'll follow up, I know not. Their number is 504-564-2525. At present, the chances of identifying this Doe seem to be next to none. Regardless, with this video, I can at least preserve his story, which has touched the hearts of so many in the almost 50 years since his death. I can only hope those who cared about him during his life eventually attained some semblance of closure and weren't left to wonder. Thank you very much for giving the case of Belle Chasse, John Doe, a moment of your day.